What if I told you that the feeling you've been interpreting as stagnation, as failure, as a kind of inner collapse, is actually the first quiet signal that something inside you has finally stopped fighting? Not stopped living, not given up, but stopped resisting a current that was always meant to carry you. Most of us spend years, sometimes decades, pushing against a tide we cannot see, believing that effort equals progress, that urgency equals aliveness, that the tightness in our chest is proof we still care. And then one day, without announcement, without ceremony, the urgency lifts, the pressure dissolves, and in its place, there is not emptiness, but a kind of stillness so unfamiliar it feels like loss. You sit at your desk and realize you no longer feel the need to prove anything. You open your phone and notice the compulsion to compare has dimmed. You think about the future, and instead of panic, there is only breath. And because we have been taught to interpret peace as complacency, because we have been conditioned to mistake silence for absence, we assume something has gone wrong. We think we've lost our edge. We think we've become lazy, passive, irrelevant. But what if that interpretation is the last defense of a self that was never truly yours? What if the loss of urgency is not the end of your becoming, but the beginning of your arrival? There is a moment in every human life, though it comes at different times and under different circumstances, when the engine that has been driving you forward suddenly idles. Not brakes, not fails, but idles. You can still move. You can still choose. But the frantic energy that once animated every decision, every relationship, every ambition has quieted. And in that quiet, you are left with a question you may not yet have words for. The question is not what should I do next? The question is who am I when I am not running? This is not a question the mind can answer quickly. It is not a question that yields to effort. It is a question that must be lived into slowly, with patience, with a kind of attention that our culture has not taught us to value. Because we live in a world that worships momentum, we are told that to slow down is to fall behind. We are told that rest is earned, not essential. We are told that if we are not hungry, we are not alive. And so when the hunger fades, when the urgency dissolves, we panic. We reach for it. We try to manufacture it. We scroll faster, work harder, fill the silence with noise. But the urgency does not return. And eventually, if we are fortunate, if we are brave enough to stop grasping, we realize that it was never meant to. Carl Jung spent much of his life observing the ways the psyche speaks to us through symbols, through dreams, through the patterns that repeat themselves in our lives, until we finally turn and face them. He understood that the unconscious is not a repository of forgotten memories, but an active, intelligent force that is always guiding us toward wholeness. He called this process individuation, not improvement, not perfection, but the slow, often painful work of becoming who we actually are beneath the layers of conditioning, expectation, and survival. And one of the most misunderstood aspects of this process is that it does not always feel like growth. Sometimes it feels like dissolution. Sometimes it feels like everything you worked for is falling away. Sometimes it feels like you have lost the very thing that made you you. But Jung would tell you that what you're losing is not yourself. It is your persona, the mask you wore to survive, the role you play to belong, the urgency you carried to prove you were enough. And when that mask begins to crack, when that role no longer fits, when that urgency no longer drives you, it is not because you have failed. It is because you are finally ready to meet what lies beneath. In this video, I will share 7 signs, 7 inner shifts that indicate the loss of urgency you are experiencing is not a collapse, but an alignment. These are not things you need to fix. They are not symptoms of weakness or apathy. They are quiet confirmations that something deeper inside you has begun to reorganize itself. You may not recognize all of them. You may recognize only one. But if even a single thread of what I describe here resonates with you, I invite you to consider that what you have been calling failure might actually be preparation. That what you have been calling loss might actually be clearing. That what you have been calling the end might actually be the first breath of something truer. Stay with me until the end, not because I will give you answers, but because together we will sit with the questions that matter. And sometimes that is enough. The first sign is this. You stop feeling the need to defend your choices. not because you have become indifferent, but because you have stopped living in the courtroom of other people's opinions. For years, maybe your entire life, you have been building a case. Every decision you made, every path you chose, every relationship you entered or left, carried with it an invisible argument. You were always preparing to justify yourself, to explain, to prove that you were not foolish, not selfish, not wrong. And this argument was not always external. Often it was internal, a constant loop of self-interrogation. Did I make the right choice? Will they understand? What will they think? This loop is exhausting. It is a kind of low-grade anxiety that hums beneath everything you do. And then one day, without deciding to, you stop. Someone asks you why you did something, and instead of launching into an explanation, you simply say, I don't know, it felt right. Or you don't say anything at all, and the silence does not feel like failure. It feels like relief. This is not apathy. This is not giving up. This is the slow, quiet emergence of an inner authority that does not need external validation to know itself. It is the self recognizing that it no longer needs to convince anyone, not even you, that it has a right to exist as it is. You might notice this in small moments first. You decline an invitation without offering a reason. You change your mind about something you once felt strongly about, and you do not feel the need to announce it. You let someone misunderstand you, and you do not rush to correct them. At first, this might feel uncomfortable. You might feel guilty. You might feel like you're being rude, or evasive, or somehow less than you were. But if you sit with it, if you allow the discomfort without trying to fix it, you will notice something underneath. A kind of spaciousness, a kind of freedom. Because the need to defend is not a sign of integrity. It is a sign of insecurity. It is a sign that you are still living in a world where your worth is contingent on being understood, on being approved of, on being right. And when that need begins to dissolve, it is not because you have stopped caring. It is because you have begun to trust that your life does not require an audience to be valid. This is alignment. This is the psyche withdrawing its energy from the outer world and redirecting it inward, toward the self that has always been there, waiting. The second sign is that you begin to lose interest in competition, not in achievement, not in excellence, but in the constant measuring of yourself against others. There was a time when you could not hear about someone else's success without feeling a pang, a tightness in your chest, a quiet voice that said, why not me? You scrolled through social media, and every post felt like evidence of your inadequacy. You attended gatherings and found yourself calculating who was ahead, who was behind, who was winning. This was not malice. This was survival, because somewhere along the way, you learned that your value was relative, that there was a hierarchy, and your job was to climb it, that if you were not moving up, you were falling down. And so you competed, you compared, you kept score, and it was exhausting, but you did not know how to stop, because to stop felt like surrender. To stop felt like admitting defeat. And then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the game loses its grip on you. You hear about someone's promotion, someone's book deal, someone's perfect relationship, and you feel nothing. Not bitterness, not envy, just a kind of neutral acknowledgement. Good for them, and you mean it. This is not because you have given up on your own life. It is because you have finally begun to understand that their life and your life are not in competition, that there is no single path, that the idea of winning was always a fiction. You might find yourself pulling back from conversations that revolve around status. You might stop checking how many likes your posts get. You might lose interest in rankings, comparisons, who is doing better, who is doing choose less feels like failure. It feels like you're not trying hard enough. But if you listen to the pull, if you honor it instead of resisting it, you will find that simplicity is not about deprivation. It is about clarity. It is about removing the noise so you can finally hear the signal. Jung spoke of the process of individuation as a kind of shedding. We do not become ourselves by adding. We become ourselves by removing everything that is not us. And the loss of urgency is often the first step in that shedding. Because urgency keeps us busy. It keeps us distracted. It keeps us from asking the questions that matter. And when the urgency lifts, we are left with space. And in that space, we can finally begin to see what is real. The sixth sign is that you feel a growing disinterest in being understood. This is different from the first sign. The first sign was about not defending your choices. This is deeper. This is about no longer needing your inner world to be visible to others. For so long, you have wanted to be seen. You have wanted people to understand your struggles, your complexity, your depth. You have shared your thoughts, your feelings, your experiences, hoping that someone would reflect back to you that you are not alone, that you make sense, that you matter. And this is not wrong. This is human. We are relational beings. We need connection. We need to be witnessed. But there is a difference between being witnessed and being understood. Being witnessed is about presence. Being understood is about interpretation. And the need to be understood is often a need for validation. A need for someone else to confirm that your experience is real, that your feelings are justified, that your perspective is correct. And when that need begins to dissolve, it is not because you have become isolated. It is because you have begun to trust your own experience without needing it to be verified by anyone else. You might notice that you share less. You speak less. You explain less. Not because you are hiding, but because you no longer feel the compulsion to translate your inner world into language that others can consume. You realize that some things are meant to be lived, not shared. Some things are meant to be felt, not explained. Some things are sacred precisely because they remain private. And this is not loneliness. This is sovereignty. This is the self reclaiming its own territory, its own authority, its own right to exist without needing to be narrated. Jung wrote about the dangers of living too much in the collective. When we are always performing, always explaining, always making ourselves legible to others, we lose touch with the parts of ourselves that cannot be translated. We lose touch with the mystery. And the loss of urgency often coincides with a return to mystery, a return to the unknown, a return to the parts of yourself that do not need to be understood to be real. And when you stop needing to be understood, you stop needing to perform. You stop needing to convince. You stop needing to prove. And what remains is simply you. Not the you that others see, but the you that you are when no one is watching. The seventh sign is that you begin to feel a quiet trust in timing. Not in the sense of everything happens for a reason, which could be a way of bypassing pain, but in the sense that you stop trying to force outcomes. You stop trying to make things happen. You stop trying to control the pace of your life. For so long, you have been in a hurry. You have been anxious about being behind. You have been terrified of missing your chance. You have believed that if you do not act now, if you do not push now, if you do not make it happen now, it will never happen. And this belief has driven you. It has kept you moving. It has kept you striving, but it has also kept you exhausted. And at some point, you realize that the urgency was never about the goal. It was about the fear that you are not enough, the fear that time is running out, the fear that if you slow down, you will be left behind. And when that fear begins to dissolve, when the urgency lifts, what emerges is not passivity. It is patience. It is the quiet, steady knowing that you do not have to force your life into being, that you do not have to manufacture momentum, that there is a rhythm to things, a timing that is not yours to control, but yours to trust. You might find yourself less anxious about the future. You might find yourself more present in the moment. You might find yourself able to wait without feeling like you're wasting time. And this is not resignation. This is not giving up. This is the deepest form of faith. Faith not in a specific outcome, but in the process itself. Faith that you are exactly where you need to be, even if it does not look like progress. Faith that the stillness is not emptiness, but preparation. Faith that the loss of urgency is not the end of your becoming, but the beginning of your arrival. Jung spoke of synchronicity as meaningful coincidence. The idea that the inner world and the outer world are not separate, but interconnected. That when we are aligned internally, the external world begins to reflect that alignment. And the loss of urgency is often the first sign that this alignment is taking place. Because urgency is a form of resistance. It is the ego trying to control, to manage, to force. And when the ego relaxes, when it stops trying to be in charge, the self can finally emerge. And the self does not rush. The self does not panic. The self simply is. And in that being, there's a kind of timing that is not about speed, but about rightness. About things unfolding in their own time, in their own way, without your intervention. When you step back and look at all 7 signs together, what you see is not a list of separate symptoms, but a single coherent process. The process of the psyche reorganizing itself. The process of the self emerging from beneath the persona. The process of alignment. You stop defending because you no longer need external validation. You stop competing because you are no longer living in comparison. You stop feeding drama because you are no longer afraid of stillness. You soften toward your past because you are no longer trying to be perfect. You simplify because you are no longer trying to prove. You stop needing to be understood because you are no longer performing. You trust timing because you are no longer resisting. And all of this, every single part of it, is not failure. It is not collapse. It is not the end. It is the beginning. It is the quiet, unglamorous, deeply sacred work of becoming who you actually